how to address those issues. And lastly, if we're going to develop a plan, it's important that we have a strategy for implementing that plan and making it real. So, what's happened in the last year? In March of 2009, we had a large forum where we invited all kinds of different user and interest groups to attend to sort of introduce this initiative and ask people some early questions about how they might want to be involved. We've also launched a website, so you can find a lot of information about what this initiative is doing and some of the work that's been completed to date at this web address. We've developed a discussion paper that outlines some of the important issues, some of the important challenges and opportunities that we might want to address with this management planning process.
Just as you're talking, I'm just wondering, like, with the we, is that the federal ministry, government, provincial?
Good question.
Where's that coming from?
Right, okay. So the we is really, I'll go back to the two bodies that were mentioned at the outset. There's a steering committee, there's a planning office. And so the steering committee is a group of sort of leaders and managers from federal government agencies. So that includes DFO, Parks Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Environment Canada, as well as representatives from First Nations. So Alex is one of the members on that steering committee. And they together provide some of through a collaborative governance arrangement, provide some of the direction and the oversight to this planning process. And there's another body, which is the planning office, and that's people like me and Steve and Ken and Hillary, who are doing the day-to-day work to sort of advance this and move it forward and interact with communities and write documents and prepare presentations and meetings like this one.
But basically it's the federal government initiative and funding and all that sort of things.
It's a collaborative governance initiative, or collaborative initiative that involves both First Nations and the federal government. The provincial government is currently involved as an observer. So they participate in a working, at a working level on the planning office, where they attend meetings, they provide input, but their status is as an observer to the project. So the impetus to do integrated management planning comes from the Oceans Act, which is a piece of legislation that was passed in 1996. And in some work that followed up on that, the federal government identified this area as one of 5 areas in Canada where this would first be done. So that's where all of this comes from. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I should have mentioned that at the outset. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And we can talk a bit more about some of the details around that as I get through this presentation. So some of the other things that have happened is we've had a number of meetings like this one with different interested parties in different places. We've started what we're calling a socioeconomic and cultural overview and assessment, which is basically our attempt to gather what we know about the important socioeconomic and cultural features of these areas. And so in order to help inform that report, we had a workshop in Prince Rupert in February where we invited people from different sectors and different interest groups and different communities to help us identify that information that we need to capture in this report. And lastly, we've developed these draft documents which you have before you and which we're interested in hearing your feedback on in terms of how do we engage with communities and different interest groups to develop this planning process. So where are we going from here? The intention is that in the coming year we want to finalize this stakeholder engagement strategy, which we're going to talk to you about. We want to establish an advisory committee that would bring together different interested parties to help work on this plan. We want to develop a work plan that sort of identifies what do we want to do in the integrated management planning process and how are we going to get there. And then we also want to develop terms of reference for that sort of cements that and puts it in place. And then we want to begin defining what we mean by ecosystem-based management. In 2011, we want to start taking that to sort of the next level in terms of identifying our ecological and our socioeconomic and our cultural objectives. What are the things we want to achieve? And then we want to identify how we're going to achieve those things. What are the strategies we're going to use to make sure that we get to our objectives? So that could be things like spatial management plans or best management practices as guidelines for how we might conduct ourselves in the marine environment. All this leading to the completion of an integrated management plan by 2012, which would be submitted to the Minister of Fisheries and Oceans for approvals. So that's kind of a brief overview of what the initiative is about and where it is. Maybe we can take a couple general questions now, and then I can speak in a bit more detail about this engagement strategy, which we want to have more focused discussions on tonight.
Yeah, let's. And then the other thing is there is a document called Context. They're all gone. Oh, here it is. So it's called the Context for the PNCIMA Planning Initiative. For those of you that are unclear about sort of the background and all that, there's a lot of good information in this document. If you feel like reading something that's going to give you quite a bit more detail. But let's take a few questions kind of generally about what's PNCIMA and how is it organized, and then we can get into the specifics of how you can become involved in the process. So like the question that was already started. Go ahead.
We're very, very low on the context document, so if you don't have one tonight, you can get it on the website. Sorry about that.
Thanks.
Well, I guess we're going to get the internet as well. That's part of you.
I'll take care.
So any questions of a general nature about what Neil has just presented in terms of what PNCIMA is? Yeah, go ahead.
Question for you. So these oil companies that come in here, for instance, you give our local government a pile of money for their government and whatnot, and they seem to have, because they give the government a pile of money for their campaign or whatever, so they expect something from all that money, right? So that seems to override. Do you guys have any power to override that?
Well,
Because that's what seems to happen. Because they give the government a lot of money to do the exploration and whatnot, and we want to see things go their way a little bit. So, talks like this don't seem to mean anything.
right. So I think the key point here is that in terms of how we want to develop this plan, the most important part is that you have everyone a part of the discussion about the plan's development. So if you have everyone at the table and you develop a process that allows for everyone to have a fair opportunity to influence the outcome of that plan, you have everything happening in one conversation, and you minimize the opportunities for people to influence something outside of that inclusive discussion. So that's what we're aiming to build here, is a planning process that has all of the different interested parties, including, if appropriate, oil and gas companies and local governments and other interested parties, to have one conversation together about what the future for this area looks like.
Other cues? Other questions?
Yeah.
Does that mean that there are oil and gas people involved in the discussion currently?
Well, in the same way that we engage with communities, we also engage different industrial sectors and invite them to consider how they want to be a participant in this process. So we would be forwarding information, inviting input, and inviting to meetings representatives from oil and gas or from commercial fisheries or recreational fisheries or whatever other kinds of industries or interest groups may have some interest in what the future of this area might look like. Well, there isn't really a table yet. What we're looking to discuss here tonight is what should that table look like that would play this part in a planning process.
And how many tables should there be? What's that?